everyone, and welcome to our next session and series of the MindWise series. We're very excited you could join us again. And just a bit of a touching base, and I'd like to welcome, thank you for everyone watching this, but also we've got our special speaker today, Kyna. Welcome, Kyna.
Hello.
And my co-presenter and co-director at MindWise Psychology, Veronica. Welcome, Veronica. So a little bit about the series. So just a little bite-sized chat so that you can get to know our practitioners here at MindWare. We're really passionate about building local connections. So we're running this lunchtime series for GPs and for any health practitioners who would like to know some of our practitioners and also know a little bit about what we do as psychologists over here at MindWare Psychology. We've been running the MindWise Moment series for a little while now, and we've got about 3 sessions, I think, now up and recording on our YouTube channel if you'd like to go back and meet some of our other practitioners if you missed this series. This series is hosted by myself and Veronica. Each session offers an interactive conversation based on discussions that are evidence-based in areas of mental health care. And today we have Kyna joining us. Kyna is a clinical psychologist now, Kyna.
Yep.
She has her Bachelor of Psychology, fresh graduate diploma of psychology, and her Masters of Clinical Psychology, and she successfully finished the registrar program. Congratulations, Kyna. Kyna has experience working with children, adolescents, and older adults in a wide variety of settings. Kyna works with a wide range of presentations. Her particular interests include anxiety, attachment-related difficulties. She is fluent in English, Hindi, and Sindhi. Did I say that correct?
Yeah.
Kyna utilises a therapeutic style that is holistic, strength-based, present-focused, and values the uniqueness of each individual in their journey. She enjoys connecting with people and helping them navigate various life changes and struggles. She uses a mix of evidence-based techniques, compassion, and a touch of fun to deliver therapy that is suited to the clients and the client's personality. So for today, Kyna is particularly going to be focusing on exploring the relationship between attachment, anxiety, and therapy across the developmental stages and different cultural contexts. So thank you very much for joining us, Kyna.
Thank you, and thank you for the introduction.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to have you as part of our team, and we're really looking forward to talking to you about those topics.
Yep. So as an introduction, I think I would just like to start with maybe explaining or giving an overview of the topic about the interplay between attachment and anxiety, and first of all, the attachment theory itself. I think under the theory, not only do we understand attachments as emotional bonds that people form with each other, but we actually look at them as biological survival strategies. So to explain that as an example, so an infant cannot really survive by itself. It needs reliable care and support from a caregiver to do so. And depending on how present and consistent the caregiver is, children can go on to develop different styles of relating to the world or attaching to the world. So if the caregiver can be reliably accessed for various different resources, and especially to gain comfort, the child can develop a sense of security and what we call the secure attachment style. But if the caregiver is inconsistent, is neglectful, or there's trauma involved, then the child may learn that others aren't reliable, and their ways of expressing distress and seeking support become unhelpful, or can become unhelpful. And they can develop insecure attachment styles, which can be understood under 3 different categories. So we have anxious, avoidant, and disorganized, which I will get into later. But that's the main distinction. And so how is attachment then relate to anxiety, and how do they affect each other? So because attachment styles are fundamentally about how people regulate fear and stress, when we know this from research that when people are secure, they feel safe enough to cope with life's challenges. And when something happens or something goes pear-shaped, they can experience the distress and express it in helpful ways and also seek support in helpful ways. Whereas when people are insecure, they might have difficulties expressing the distress in the first place, or might exaggerate it even, or feel the anxiety as more heightened as as the average person would, and worry about, I guess, abandonment even. And so attachment isn't just a side issue. It really dictates how you feel your anxiety and how you seek support around it.
So that's great. Thank you so much for that overview of what attachment and that attachment styles and patterns can look like. Why do you think that that's important information for GPs to potentially have an awareness of, or even the general public as a whole? How does that knowledge help in that space, do you think?
So GPs see the front line of anxiety almost every day, and patients don't walk in and say, I have attachment difficulties. They complain of panic attacks, palpitations, other symptoms like headaches, insomnia, or endless reassurance seeking. If a GP understands the attachment theory or how attachment and anxiety are related, they can see that these aren't just random symptoms, but patterns rooted in how the person relates to themselves and others. And for the public, I think it's important for them to also understand this, and for the GPs to reduce shame. So instead of seeing anxiety as a weakness, the GPs can educate people that they are mere survival blueprints, and they were adapted so that children could maximize safety and connection with their caregivers. And I think having that sort of conversation with the patients at the front line can really help them to seek support further.
So I think Tanya introduced when she said that you would also talk or link a little bit of that to how we might see that express itself at different developmental stages as well. So do we see that in different presentations in different ways? Is that? Yeah.
So talking about childhood, so insecure attachment can look like clinginess, excessive crying when separated, or reluctance to explore events and unfamiliar situations independently. These children may also be prone to worry and somatic complaints like tummy aches. In adolescence, it shifts towards, I guess, more peer and romantic relationships. And insecurely attached individuals may go on to, or they're at a heightened risk of developing social anxiety. They'll, either completely avoid social events, or they'll obsess over fitting in. And there's lots of, and it also ties into risk-taking behaviors. So we see that people who are insecurely attached might present with greater risk-seeking in adolescence than people who are securely attached. So yeah, that's how I think they would present in adolescence. And then with adults, I guess we see problems, especially in the workplace. I think they present with difficulties as to fitting in the workplace and getting, work done collaboratively with their colleagues, and preoccupation with relationships, and lots of distress when there's a breakdown. And in older adulthood, which is, can include lots of losses, so loss of partners, health, independence. We can see people not coping with those losses as well, and also not using support networks, with reluctance to build support networks to cope with those stresses.
I'm just wondering, Kyna, if you could maybe speak a little bit to the point around the role that trauma perhaps can kind of play in that attachment development, because that's probably a key part of that, isn't it? Some of those traumatic experiences within that home setting are also setting up that attachment style.
Yep. So when there's trauma involved, so whether it being the caregiver itself being traumatized, or whether it's through the actions of the caregiver, the infant or the child ends up being traumatized, either way, then are likely to develop what we call a fearful avoidant attachment style, or the disorganized attachment style. And so what happens here is that we see traits of both anxious and avoidant, meaning sometimes we see this in these children or individuals be clingy and really, that difficulty separating from the caregiver, and other times they can be stone cold and even react unpredictably to people trying to connect with them. So that's how trauma, I think, interplays with attachment there. Does that answer your question, Veronica?
Yeah, I was just reflecting, I suppose, on conversations you and I have had once before, even in terms of how the parents' attachment style that they have, that they might have had even from their own childhood, goes on to even impact the parental structure and the way then that the child develops, because so it's almost like it becomes layered, doesn't it? Like in terms of we've got the parent impacting the child, with the child then having their development impacted as well.
Yeah, definitely. So we see that a lot of people that I've seen in my experience, they often say that their relationships with their caregivers improve as adults. And I think that has less to do with the caregiver's responsiveness, but more to do with the fact that the individual's needs have changed over their lifespan. So the younger they are, the more complex their needs are. And then as they get older, they can self-regulate and self-soothe a bit more. So yes, you do. I think it's an interaction as well. So it depends on the caregiver and the child that they're interacting with and their personality traits as well.
And I guess it's important to probably point out that when we're talking about attachment styles, we talk about that as psychologists because it becomes a frame of reference for us to understand the client's presentation, doesn't it? So rather than it just being a CBT or an acceptance and commitment, we're looking at it from that earlier childhood attachment development pattern too. So that's probably why we do it, isn't it? It's just a different lens to look at the problem through.
Yeah. And I think it just gives you that broader lens as well, because with anxiety, you can get caught up with the specific problem that the person comes in with. Whereas when you've got that attachment lens, I think you can almost characterize what this person struggles with, and dealing with those struggles on a deeper layer rather than just correcting the immediate anxiety that we see.
Yeah, excellent. That's an excellent point, isn't it? It's that holistic lens that we're often looking through, and that developmental lens, would you say? Like it's that understanding that a person can develop anxiety because of a trigger, as you're saying, but they're almost primed because of the way their attachment style was already wired to get them.
And I think it's a good way to look at that at times too, because it's not being specific to the therapeutic model you're using. It's really looking at it from the experience, from what you're talking about, rather than looking at, I'm going to do CBT, this is what it's going to look like. You're looking at it from the client's perspective and their lived experience.
Yeah, definitely.
Kind of do attachment styles stay fixed across the lifespan, or do they actually change a little as that progresses?
So attachment styles, once crystallized, and research shows us that they get crystallized by the age of 5, and then there's a period, I think it's between 10 and 13, that they can change again, or the experiences can have a profound impact on the style, but they relatively are stable. They're like if I had to compare them, the personality trait of shyness. So a shy person, given a very particular environment, can come out of their shell and not be shy, but that's their go-to trait. So I think I would think of attachment styles like that. So you have that one stable attachment style, but then depending on who you interact with as well, and the time that you interact with that particular person, it can change. So we know that insecure individuals, given a corrective attachment experience or really supportive, loving, consistent relationships later on in life, can actually change the way they attach in those particular supportive, loving relationships.
Yeah, that's a fantastic. And Tanya, that really reminds me of that workshop that we went to years back at one of those conferences that was run by a guy called Stan Tatkin. And he's like a specialist in couples therapy and attachment. And he works with that from that exact model that you're talking about, this idea that if we can understand relationships in later life as opportunities that we're trying to correct attachment patterns that we've had in earlier childhood, and that often in our primary partnership we're going on then to try and have experiences that will help us develop that more secure attachment, but often we don't, which is how come people end up in so many relationship counselling sessions.
Yeah, and I think it's particularly sometimes it's, as you were talking about, kind of too, it might crystallize in the younger years, but depending on what our relationships are, it might be presenting in different ways. And one of those life stages you speak about, like we're speaking about older adults or adults, but a big change is when you enter into an intimate relationship, that you then really see the interplay of that dynamic of the couple come out, where beforehand, when they're navigating their own adult world on their own, doesn't come up as much. And that's why I think in couples work like Stan Tatkin's, you really get to see the interplay of that attachment coming out again. And when we see people present, and your doctors might even see them present for therapy.
Yeah, definitely.
Honey, you've got an interesting wealth of knowledge, because you obviously genuinely cross cultures. And I think that's something that we are so proud of here in our clinic, is that we actually genuinely are able to offer cross-cultural experiences for people who are really wanting to connect with someone who really resonates and understands their own culture, because it is different, isn't it? And we've touched on that a lot. But does attachment patterns, are they consistent across cultures as well? Or do we find that there's a difference between Western cultures and Eastern cultures?
So you can find all different types across cultures, but I guess depending on the culture that you come from, and I'm just going to talk about the more Western individualist cultures and the collectivistic cultures from the East, and use that framework. So culture defines what good relationships look like. And in Western individualistic cultures, independence and self-reliance are prized. So avoidant behaviors such as keeping distance and being emotional restraint may be socially rewarded, whereas in collectivistic cultures, interdependence and family loyalty are central, which means anxious behaviors like worrying about family approval may be tolerated, even expected. So while attachment categories are universal, the way they play out and how they are perceived differ significantly across cultures.
Yeah, great. And does the physical symptoms, do they show up differently across cultures, or is that fairly static?
It can differ. So in collectivistic cultures, there's a lot of stigma still attached to saying I feel anxious or I'm depressed. So instead, distress is expressed more somatically, so through physical symptoms, so headaches, fatigue, dizziness, stomach pain. These symptoms are real. The body truly manifests anxiety, but the cultural script for expressing distress is physical, not emotional. This means that when GPs interact with multicultural communities, as they do, they need to look beyond the physical complaint and maybe consider if that may be an expression of anxiety.
Yeah, that's it. That must make it a little bit more complex to sort of see that, if it's that little bit more hidden as well. Are there particular indicators that might make that a little bit easier?
I think what can help is curiosity. I think just maybe trying to invest the time to get to know the individual and a little bit about their culture and what culture they come from, and whether, like I said, it rewards the collectivism or the independence, and then asking them those explicit questions. How do you understand what you're experiencing? Do you think it could be something beyond physical and just physical symptoms? How does your family see it? I think those kind of questions might help.
I think it's really, that curiosity is so helpful in practice, isn't it? And particularly, I've noticed even locally here, working with the refugee community, some of them even just don't even have the language around how to express the mental health perspective. Like when we say we're anxious or we're depressed or we're flat, they only have the language to present how they feel in their body at times.
Yeah. And I guess the problems that people come in with can also give it away, in the sense that if somebody openly talks about heart palpitations and breathing difficulties, I think it's a sign that, and ask for reassurance, despite of tests coming back and saying everything's normal, I think that is more leaning towards the anxious attachment spectrum. And then if they're talking about GI or issues like, skin problems, and only presenting when distress is at its peak and still downplaying it, I think that's an indication that they're sitting on in that avoidant zone.
And I think that's another interesting point that happens too, is that people can kind of be between two cultures too, can't they? So in other words, they may be growing up in an Eastern collective culture, but then they've come over to Australia to do their studies, and then they've ended up coming and residing here. And I guess I've noticed that the clients with that presentation, sometimes there's a bit more of we forget about their family of origin space, because we just assume they're very westernized and operating out of that model. But that's not always the case, is it?
No, and I think that's it. I think the attachment theory is really trying to hone in on the fact that those initial childhood experiences are very fundamental, and they just cannot be, I guess, not focused on. And it's important to get that more holistic view of the individual, and talking about childhood and culture then becomes quite important.
Yeah, no, thank you. I really always value your input around that cultural space, because you just have that, we talk about that lived experience, and I think that's something that we can learn, but we can't obtain unless we have it like yourself. So I'm always so grateful when you do share those insights with us. But if I come back to, I guess, to the topic we're supposed to be focusing as much on, is in terms of therapeutic approaches with children with attachment and anxiety related disorders, what sort of therapeutic approaches do you find most effective?
So with children particularly, therapy for those issues will almost always involve parents. And play therapy can really be used to then secure the bond between the parent and the child. So I guess family-based interventions, or any interventions that bring families together and teach them to interact differently, can be very effective. And we can use CBT, but it will have to be a modified version of it and heavily involve the parent in it for it to be effective. So we're not just saying to the child, hey, you need to cope with your anxiety better. We're now saying, hey, as a caregiver, we also need to change the way we respond.
And I'm not sure if this is your area, but I guess circle of security kind of works on that idea, isn't it? Is that real lived experience of trying to change that attachment pattern in that earlier experience of life?
Yeah. So the child can feel secure enough to go and explore the world, and then come back when they're distressed and get the soothing, and then go back again, and the cycle just keeps repeating itself as much as it needs to.
Does that vary? Like, do you find different therapeutic approaches depending on the developmental age, like as in teenagers or adults? Because obviously you wouldn't do as much circle of security or reparenting, I'm thinking. So I'm assuming there's a different approach we take in those spaces.
Yes, definitely. So with adolescents and adults, it's more about involving peer dynamics and intimate relationships rather than involving parents. So that's the fundamental difference there. And also, I guess, teaching the adolescents and adults, I guess, emotional regulation and mindfulness-based skills so they can learn how to self-soothe. And also relationship skills, and mainly communication skills for the avoidant attachers, so that they can learn and feel safe, that it's safe to express distress to others and seek support. And especially with adults, I think the therapeutic relationship, not just with the therapist or the psychologist, but even the GP, can become a model for secure attachment. And that's why it's important for GPs to know the different therapies and what works and what doesn't, so that when the patient comes in and they ask for, let's say, a lot of reassurance, the GP can go, okay, well, this is what's really happening for this person. instead of getting annoyed or frustrated at the patient themselves. So yeah, that understanding can come in really handy.
Actually, kind of, that's a really great point that I hadn't really thought about is that those anxious people are probably presenting in that way with their GPs as well. And that could be that indicator, rather than getting annoyed, is understanding it through that framework as well. That's a great.
But it must be a balance as well then too, Veronica, I think, in terms and kind of, because I think you want to reassure, but then they've got to be careful, the doctors and a medical professional, not to get trapped into that too, because, you're going to continue to reinforce that.
Yes, yeah, definitely. And I think that's where we come in, and they can just redirect these people to us after giving them sort of the basic foundational information, and encourage them to seek professional support to address that reassurance seeking.
Kind of, we are all aware that there is such a long wait list to get into psychologists at the moment, isn't there? So I'm wondering, in this space we're talking about today, is there any particular ways that GPs can support their patients while they're potentially waiting for treatment in this space?
I guess normalizing symptoms and providing that frontline, I guess, basic information about attachment styles and attachment theory. If the GPs think that is something that's going on for their patients, I think that is very important. And also looking after the more physical side of things, so physical symptoms and medication, I think, and encouraging people to just even build better support networks and socialize more if that's not something that they're doing enough, or look after themselves. I think that advice alone can go a far way.
Now, I'm sure that Tanya's going to remind us shortly that we're nearly due to finish up. And I have got one question that I've asked every psychologist when I first started, and you were so excited, Kyna, that I didn't get to ask my most favourite question. So you're going to have to answer it at the end for me. My question I ask everyone is, why did you become a psychologist? What led you into psychology?
Ironically enough, I think my own recognizing my own attachment difficulties and patterns and the distress that they were leading to, I think it made me access the very, very much needed help. And that was a very good experience and a life-changing experience that I went through. And I think that was the inspiration for doing it for others.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Kyna, for sharing something so personal, but that lived experience, or that is what's driven you to then be motivated to want to make a difference to others. And thank you for following that journey and being a psychologist. Was there anything else as a final comment or final sort of thing you'd like to say, Kyna, before we finish?
Just that, attachment is something lifelong, and it really influences people, profoundly, and it's normal. It's normal to, I guess, relate to the world in a certain way that you've picked up as a kid, and it can be worked on.
Well, thank you. Now, and Veronica, anything else you'd like to add to finish up the session today?
No, look, I concur with everything that Kyna was just saying there, in that, and I think it's something in psychology that we haven't acknowledged for a long time, is we knew about attachment, but I don't think we were always looking at things through this attachment lens. We tended to just look at kids through that attachment lens, whereas I think it's become such a valuable framework for us, I think, to understand more holistically a person's behaviour, rather than it just becoming a medical model. That attachment model really allows us to acknowledge the role of so many other factors that have gone on to shape that person, and possibly are even the greater dictator of so much of our unconscious behaviour. So, I mean, I was really excited when Kyna was saying that she was happy to speak on this topic, because I think it is such an important one for us to really get out there and to be thinking about a lot more when we're working with clients. So, Kyna, I'm very grateful for you coming along and being willing to share and step out into that space and have that conversation with us. So, no, thank you.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
Kyna.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Veronica. And thank you, Kyna, for joining us. And thank you for the GPs and mental health professionals who have joined us as well. If not live, then you've also joined us with our recording. If you would like to refer a client or have any more questions, you can either go to our YouTube channel and have a look at our sessions there, or if you're liking to refer, you can refer either by emailing us at contact@mindwarepsychology.com.au, or you can email us or call us on 4646 4953 and have a chat to our lovely reception team. We have another makeup session because one of our participants was unwell. So Olivia Olson will be coming back soon. We're just going to be finding out a date, and we will get back out to you around that date soon. But otherwise, we've completed the session of this MindWise Mindware moments, and we appreciate you joining us. And everyone, thank you very much on behalf of MindWare Psychology, and thank you, Kyna, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.